will begin with the induction of Clifford Germain. Presentations will be made by his colleagues within the Department of Natural Resources. I'm going to introduce all three of them now, and then they in turn will introduce each other as they come up. Signe Holtz is the director, or was director of the DNR, Bureau of Endangered Resources. She will begin the presentation. She will then hand it off to Paul Matthey, who was the chief of the Wisconsin State Natural Areas Program. And then we'll finish up with a presentation, and I think it's some slides by Thomas Meyer, conservation biologist with the same program. I invite you up, Signe, take over. Is our speaker still working correctly, loudspeaker? You may want to check that out, see if it fits your volume. Okay, thank you very much.
Good morning. I think this is the right level, and hope you can all hear me. We're here today to celebrate the induction of Clifford Germain into the Wisconsin Conservation Hall of Fame. My name is Signe Holtz, and I worked for many years in the Department of Natural Resources. I worked in the Natural Areas Program. I also worked in the Real Estate Program. And then I finished my official career as the director of the Bureau of Endangered Resources. During my graduate work at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, and also during my work at the Department of Natural Resources, I came to know the many contributions that Cliff has made to conservation of biological diversity in Wisconsin and beyond. I was also the beneficiary of the work and legacy of a long line of scientists, preservationists, and visionaries that include such legends as John Muir, Alda Leopold, John and Olive Thompson, John Curtis, Grant Cottam, Nina Leopold Bradley, Forrest Stearns, Jenna Klein, Evelyn Howell, Cliff Germain, and Paul Matthey. Cliff Germain is being inducted into the Hall of Fame for his vision and leadership of the Wisconsin Scientific Areas Program, later known as the State Natural Areas Program. The development of an inventory system for natural areas, his leadership to create organizations dedicated to natural area protection, the development of the Natural Division's map of Wisconsin, and the protection and acquisition of thousands of acres of Wisconsin's most ecologically significant natural landscapes. Wisconsin conservationists as far back as John Muir were concerned about the loss of natural communities, but it wasn't until 1945 that the Wisconsin Conservation Commission established a Natural Areas Committee on a motion by Alda Leopold. The program was then put into law in 1951, and it was the first of its kind in the country. Between then and 1966, the committee protected some very significant natural communities on state-owned lands. It became apparent, however, that there needed to be a staff person to really spearhead the work of the committee. Finally, in the 1965 state budget, there were funds for a full-time staff person, and in 1966, Cliff was hired to be the first staff person, an ecologist, of the Wisconsin Conservation Department's Scientific Areas Program. When Cliff began his work, he found that there was a long backlog of sites that had been recommended for the Scientific Areas Program. And in order to meet the program's objective of protecting examples of every type of natural community, and the natural communities had been defined in the book The Vegetation of Wisconsin in 1959 by John Curtis. Cliff also saw the need for a way to systematically identify all natural areas across the state of Wisconsin. So he decided that the best way to inventory these natural areas was by county, and this led to the development of the county inventory system, county by county of Wisconsin. These inventories were done between 1969 and 1986. And they were the first of their kind in the country, and they were highly successful. They were so successful, in fact, that many other states adopted that county-by-county inventory method when they began their own natural areas programs. All of the data collected were used to identify the best examples of each community type and facilitate the protection of them. These data later formed the basis of the natural community portion of the Wisconsin Natural Heritage Inventory database. While the inventories were being done, Cliff continued to protect the most important of these sites, but it became clear that the strategies used to protect natural areas needed to be expanded. Many sites were already on state-owned lands within state parks, state forests, state wildlife areas, state fishery areas. And during the 1970s, these sites were being master planned. There was a big push to do master plans of all state lands. And so Cliff would propose designating as state natural areas these high-quality natural areas that were already found on these lands. This designation was not always warmly received within the department, but Cliff's advocacy helped others to see the importance and the rarity of these areas. Cliff also worked with colleges and with other state, county, and federal governments to protect sites on their lands as well. Another strategy to protect sites is to work with partner organizations. While a wildlife manager in southeastern Wisconsin, Cliff had worked with a young organization, the Wisconsin chapter of the Nature Conservancy, to protect portions of Shiwaukee Prairie. Over the years, the Nature Conservancy and Cliff worked on many projects in acquisition of sites around the state. And these projects, Shiwaukee Prairie, Lulu Lake, Young Hemlock Beach Forest, formed the basis of a very successful collaboration. A third protection strategy was, of course, direct acquisition of land by the Department of Natural Resources. In 1966, when Cliff was hired, there were no funds specifically set aside for the purchase of scientific areas. Through Cliff's efforts and the efforts of others, the 1972 budget finally contained dedicated funds for the purchase of scientific areas. The initial budget was $50,000, and subsequent funding programs have provided even more money for land acquisition. Given these strategies, the Scientific and Natural Areas program grew from 48 sites comprising 10,000 acres in 1955 to 211 sites totaling more than 50,000 acres at Cliff's retirement. Thomas Meyer will be sharing with us some data and photos from many of these well-known and treasured sites around the state. Cliff's legacy of protection lives on. The State Natural Areas program is the largest in the nation and currently protects 673 sites and more than 375,000 acres of land. These sites meet the objective of the program as set forth in state statutes to protect outstanding examples of Wisconsin's native landscape of natural communities, significant geologic formations, and archaeological sites. These places preserve Wisconsin's biologic and genetic diversity and are used for research and education and provide public access for nature-based recreation. In the early 1970s, Cliff and George Fell, who was his counterpart in Illinois, along with others in the Midwest, decided that those involved in natural areas management and protection should get together and share their stories and share their strategies, their successes and failures. Cliff hosted the first meeting in Wyalusing State Park in 1974, and the workshop was so successful that there was enough interest in founding a national organization. Cliff was a founding member of the Natural Areas Association in 1978. It is now an international organization which publishes a peer-reviewed journal and hosts an annual scientific conference for its more than 2,100 members. During these years, Cliff discovered a need for a map of Wisconsin that would delineate the natural divisions of Wisconsin based on soils, bedrock, climate, and pre-settlement vegetation. Working with soil scientist Francis Howell, they developed such a map, the Natural Divisions of Wisconsin, which was published in 1994. This map is used by conservation planners, foresters, soil conservationists, land managers, and it has influenced the development of maps and classifications at both state and federal levels. I think we have a copy, maybe out in the hallway, of the Natural Divisions map, if you'd like to take a look at it later. Cliff's leadership has been recognized by the Natural Areas Association with their Lifetime Achievement Award, by the Department of Natural Resources with the naming of an 88-acre Oneida County Natural Areas, Germain Hemlocks, by appointments to several committees of the Nature Conservancy over the years, and by the Madison Audubon Society, which not only gave them an award, but named an annual award for restoration in honor of Cliff. And so, from John Muir's attempt to protect a meadow on his family farm in 1865, to Leopold's recognition of the importance of natural area protection by the state in 1945, by John Curtis's definition of Wisconsin's natural communities in 1959, to Cliff Germain's leadership to develop Wisconsin's Natural Areas Program, the Wisconsin legacy to protect every cog and wheel continues. Thank you, Cliff, for protecting Wisconsin's biological diversity. And now, please welcome Paul Matthey. Paul is the former head of the Natural Areas Program, and he was also resident biologist and manager of the UWM field station, and he will share his insights and a few stories about Cliff.
Thank you, Signe. Cliff grew up in Merrill, Wisconsin, where he enjoyed hunting and fishing like most Northwoods boys. By the time he graduated high school, World War II had started, and he was off to the Army. Trained as a radio operator, he was initially stationed in California. Having a fair amount of free time, he took advantage of an Army education program to study engineering at Stanford University. Unfortunately for Cliff, that program was abruptly ended after 9 months and he was sent to Europe. But not as an accomplished radio operator and repair specialist, but as a truck driver. By the end of the war, Cliff had seen most of Germany and had developed an appreciation for German forestry and wildlife management. On returning to Wisconsin, he enrolled in UW-Madison, switching from engineering to zoology and biological aspects of conservation, and studying under such notable scholars as Leopold, Fassett, Hickey, and Thompson, graduating with a double major with honors. By now, Cliff knew what he wanted to do and where he wanted to do it: wildlife research or management at the Wisconsin Conservation Department. He was referred to Cy Cabot in wildlife research, who hired him to conduct deer research in Cabot, Wisconsin. After a few years, he moved on to Ladysmith, then to Woodruff as a wildlife manager. After single-handedly challenging and defeating the practice of protecting winter deer yards, he transferred to Racine and Kenosha counties, where, when he wasn't resolving political problems, he managed pheasants. In 1966, he was hired as the first coordinator of the State Scientific Areas Program. My association with Cliff dates back to the late 1960s and 70s, when, as the resident manager of the UW-Milwaukee field station, I came to learn of the then new Scientific Areas Program. Because of the station's proximity to several natural areas, later to become known as several scientific areas, later to become known as natural areas, Cliff asked if I would assume a stewardship role, which I gladly accepted. As a result, I was rewarded with years of thoughtful mentoring from Cliff, who was clearly thinking and operating outside of the box, into which most traditional land and wildlife management was pegged. He was and is a forward thinker. Cliff knew that the only way Wisconsin would successfully conserve its biological diversity would be through the protection of the best remaining examples of the pre-European settlement plant and animal communities. He also knew that given the impacts of urban and industrial sprawl, growth in agriculture, intensive forest management, and the growing quest for recreational lands, there would be a relative few years left to achieve that protection. To address that challenge, Cliff designed and initiated the first systematic statewide inventory of scientific and natural areas in the nation. In the process, he managed to find and protect the vast majority of rare and threatened endangered plants and endangered plants and animals, both terrestrial and aquatic, in the state. As a result, not only were the individual species protected, but so too were the functioning ecosystems they required to survive. In 1980, I was fortunate to be hired as the Assistant Section Chief for Natural Areas. There I learned firsthand how difficult it was for Cliff to achieve the protection and management goals he sought. From the 1960s through the 1980s, there was nearly universal resistance on the part of state and federal agency managers to the emerging sciences of conservation biology and restoration ecology. Fish, wildlife, and forest managers were in general species managers. The concepts of conserving biological diversity and ecosystem-based management were not well received by those charged with managing game, fish, and wildlife in forest resources, or forest trees, for harvest goals. Through dogged persistence, Cliff began to convene natural resource managers Cliff began to convince natural resource managers of the value of preserving natural processes and of the importance of old growth forest, of maintaining and restoring remnant prairie and savanna, and of not trying to make every property be everything to everybody. Perhaps the most important legacy that Cliff left when he retired from the state service was the work ethic that he demonstrated every day and his intense dedication to creating the State Natural Area Program. Cliff's hard work and dedication didn't go unnoticed. Soon the Wisconsin chapter of the Nature Conservancy began to work closely in support of this innovative state program. Other states began establishing similar programs modeled after Wisconsin's state natural areas. Cliff was instrumental in forming the Midwest Association of Natural Areas, an organization today that has grown into one of national, international recognition. Today, Cliff can proudly boast having the Today, Wisconsin can proudly boast having the premier natural areas program in the United States. It comes as a result of the untiring service and dedication of the man who, with quiet determination, took on his own and other agencies and showed them the direction to more responsible and holistic natural resource protection and management. On a personal note, Cliff and I were working in the North Woods one week, staying at the usual motel. We had been in the field all day and were enjoying sitting in comfortable lawn chairs outside our rooms before calling it a night. Cliff appeared to be lost in deep thought, so I asked him what was on his mind. To my surprise, he said he was thinking about his youth, about how he would walk out in the yard of his home in Merrill at night and could see the glow of the fires that raged around the city following the Great Logging Era. We talked some about how far Wisconsin had come in reclaiming those burned over landscapes, but also we talked about how much further we had to go. Wisconsin can be thankful that we had Cliff Germain working for our conservation interests. Since that evening, I've often thought of the impact those fires glowing on the Merrill skyline had on the Cliff I came to know and respect as an outstanding conservationist. I'd like to introduce Thomas Meyer, who works in the Natural Area Program now for over 20 years. In addition to being an excellent botanist, he is a superb photographer and will share with us not only the beauty but the biological importance of the state natural areas that Cliff works so hard to protect and preserve. Thomas?
Thank you, Paul. And thank you for the words from Sigmund and Paul. These are my remarks, so I'll be quite a bit shorter. I will let the images talk for me. Since 1993, I've had the distinct pleasure and privilege of working for the State Natural Areas Program. In 2002, we celebrated our 50th anniversary of the program. Wisconsin Public Television put together a very nice documentary called Wild Places. I've taken some of the clips from the Wild Places video and put them along with some photographs of some of Cliff's state natural areas that he's helped protect over the years. And this is a tribute to his work.
They are rare places, pure places. They are our wild places. We have nearly 400 places like these. All part of our state's Natural Areas program. This is just one of some 400 places that are part of this innovative, trailblazing model housed within Wisconsin's Department of Natural Resources. There are state natural areas in nearly every county in the state. They range from the modest, the small woods, foothills of the Baraboo Hills, to the mighty, a native prairie called Avoca, the largest left standing east of the Mississippi River. They hold stunning vistas. They hold small delights. Take a look. Take a look at Baxter's Hollow. Chewauquee Prairie. Beulah Bog. Frog Lake and Pines. Different in every season. Saved forever. Cliff Germain, the program's first director.
Natural areas are tracts of land or water in a natural or near natural state to be set aside, preserved, to protect the plant and animal communities and to preserve them for research, educational use, and just simply for future generations.
For research, education, for future generations.
Aldo Leopold was on the Wisconsin Conservation Commission board at that time. And he had convinced the commission that they should spend some money, not just on parks and wildlife areas, but also to purchase some natural areas. And he had a token amount, I think $35,000 was set up so that they could buy Partridge Glen as the first area.
Over time, other natural areas were designated on state land. But it wasn't until 1965 that the program first received two essential items: money for support and money for a staff. Staff of one, that is. Then staff and staff director, Cliff Germain.
I recall that I had one assistant, a student, and I had a canoe and a station wagon and a pair of binoculars, and that was about my equipment.
One man, many acres. This is what Germain and the program set in motion. Nearly 400 natural areas. Over 150,000 acres saved.
A phenomenal presentation on Clifford, Germain. I'd like to thank the speakers, Signe, Paul, and Thomas for the words, and I think Thomas probably stole the show again, where we've learned 1,000 pictures is even better than 1,000 words. So thank you for the phenomenal photography, and oftentimes realizing we need to build more of that kind of visual and musical imagery into these programs. So here's a challenge for us in future years. With that, I'd like to call Katrina Schenklin forward and have her read the legislative tribute. As with most legislative things, they can be sometimes dry, but I have found if you pay attention, it summarizes so well in so few words the phenomenal things that Clifford has done in his life. So, Katrina?
I'm so pleased to present this legislative citation today. I know you by these presents. Whereas Clifford E. Germain was born in Merrill, Wisconsin in 1924, served in the United States Army in the 1940s, and earned a Bachelor of Science in Zoology from the University of Wisconsin-Madison in 1949. And whereas Clifford was later hired by the Wisconsin Conservation Department, where he took on multiple positions, including wildlife manager in Waterford and game manager in Woodruff, and went on to work with inventory and purchase wetlands that today comprise the state wildlife area. And whereas Clifford was hired as a staff member for the State Board for the Preservation of Scientific Areas, now the Natural Areas Preservation Council, and was the first ecologist hired by Wisconsin Conservation Department, where he developed the county-by-county inventory that produced the inventory protocols eventually utilized by many states. And whereas Clifford continued his preservation efforts in order to maintain the ecological quality by working with the Nature Conservancy, which allowed him to grow through other partner organizations as well. And whereas Clifford sought out and lobbied for a budget to buy ecologically sensitive lands, and in 1972, the Department of Natural Resources began to fund a program for scientific area acquisition from the Wisconsin Outdoor Recreation Act program. And whereas Clifford's efforts led to the growth of nature preserve sites from 48 in 1966 to over 673 sites today, in what is now known as the Wisconsin State Natural Areas Program. And whereas Clifford was a founder of the Natural Areas Association and received the professional organization's first George Fell Award for lifetime achievement, served on the Board of Trustees of the Nature Conservancy for many years, remained active in the work of the Audubon Society and other organizations, and was recognized in 2002 on the 50th anniversary of the State Natural Areas Program by having the Germain Hemlock State Natural Area in Oneida County named in his honor. And whereas Clifford is a 2014 inductee to the Wisconsin Conservation Hall of Fame, now therefore, Senator Julie Lassa and Representative Katrina Schenklin do hereby honor Clifford E. Germain for his lifelong leadership in the effort to conserve unique ecological areas and his remarkable contributions to the scientific study of our exceptional wild places. Thank you very much.
It's at this time that we would unveil the plaque. And then after that, we're going to ask Cliff to come up and say a few words. So I think, Katrina, if you could help me with this one, it would be quite good. Invite everybody to come up and see the walnut plaques after the induction ceremony, and even more, I invite you to come to the Hall of Fame gallery to take a look at these 3 new plaques amongst the other 80 that are there. I recognize that the plaques don't go home with the inductee, although I think in some ways that would be quite good if that would happen. Started a little bit different tradition this year, in which I asked the people who made the plaque to make a small replica of that on a piece of parchment. So Clifford, you could take this home and put it in your sunny room or your kitchen or wherever you like to keep a memento of today. And certainly come back anytime you want to see the tribute in the Hall of Fame. So Clifford, I invite you to come up to say a few words. I think to start things out, we'll present him with these 2 things just to begin with.
On behalf of the state of Wisconsin, here's our legislative citation. Thank you so much for your work.
Well, this will be short. I was promised I only had to say thank you, but looking at the group here today, I don't know if I can say thank you well enough. It's a great honor to be recognized by the Conservation Hall of Fame, and I'm especially appreciative to the people responsible for my nomination and those that supported the nomination. I've reflected quite a bit about this in the last few weeks or so, and going back over old files, and this award really is for the successful State Natural Area Program, and I was really just a small part of that program. You've heard about how Aldo Leopold started this thing in the late 40s and 50s, and there were many natural I'm trying to come up with the right words now. I'm having a little memory problems, but natural science educators, I think, around the state recognized this need for protection. And Aldo was one of those, along with John Curtis and some others. But they later then became advisors to this program. And there's one of those advisors here today, Bob Engelhardt, who was on the committee or the council advising this program for quite a few years. So that advisory council frequently set the policy and told me what was the best thing to do. So we were just following directions. Then I have to recognize that this state, I suppose every state, has so many people that are just simply interested in preserving wild places. And they frequently join groups. The Nature Conservancy Wisconsin chapter which I think we wouldn't have had the State Natural Area Program without that Wisconsin chapter. We worked hand in hand over the years protecting sites. And I especially remember young hemlocks where we received word in Madison from our forester up there that there was going to be an auction and this young hemlock tract preserved by the family for many years would be sold. We didn't have time to do much, but I contacted the Nature Conservancy. They sent an attorney up to the auction with me. We bid against the Weyerhaeuser Lumber Company and managed to come up with a high bid. So those are good memories of the program. And good memories of the cooperation that was required to make things go. My 20-year stint with the program was extremely enjoyable. I had just a small group of natural science specialists, zoologists and botanists that were assisting me. But from those people, and a few of them are here today, I learned a lot because they shared their knowledge with me. So I thank them very much. I think, though, the program, since I retired, has expanded greatly, and they're doing a lot better job of management. So I think the credit for today also belongs to those people who are continuing the program. And I should especially thank, though, my family, my extended family, and all of the friends who came here to celebrate this with me. I'm glad I'm alive to be here today to do it. So thank you all very much.